Do that often.
It left ridges on your head.
That's why I'm leaving it on.
That's fantastic. Looks like you
before.
tried corn rolls but quit. You went to the barber and you were like, I want cornrows. He was like, there ain't no hair up here. He's like, make the rows anyway.
Yeah, I want you to make
never
my,
seen that
I
before.
want you to make my scalp wavy. Give me scalp waves instead
What's
of
going on, everybody? We are the Bourbonists. We have
Joseph.
Adam.
And Dan,
How's it going? We welcome back to the table.
Thank you.
We are drinking Heaven Hill Grain to Glass Bourbon Whiskey, the number 5 whiskey on the top 25 whiskeys of 2024 for Whiskey Advocate.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's 100 bones MSRP. Got it for 112 myself. I was pretty proud of that.
So you paid, what is that? $1.03 per proof?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, 100%. Or I guess 107%. No, 53.5%. 35% rye, 52% corn, 13% malted barley. Bottled in 2017. Man, what was I doing?
It has sweet apple on the nose.
That's
when I
real
took a sip
good.
of it.
It's real good. It's lighter than what we're used to. You
I
know.
can see that.
But, oh yeah, crisp Granny apple, Granny Smith.
Kind of reminds me of a apple crisp.
Yeah. And then we're smoking the Rosa de Guadalupe, AJ Fernandez.
I don't know much about this.
It's got AJ's name on it. It's going to be good. Mm-hmm. And it is good. I had this last week. This is fantastic. Not this exact cigar. I didn't like puke it back out or anything.
you just
Thanks for clarifying.
That cigar was so good. I think I'd like to have it again. This
you
is
just
the
press your
SpongeBob
belly
episode.
button, and all of a sudden it comes out.
The SpongeBob episode where like he takes like half an hour to make one patty, and King Neptune makes like 3,000.
Oh yeah.
And he eats SpongeBob, and he's like, "That was so good. I think I'd have that again."
Regurgitate it.
Like the sound it made when he puked it up.
I don't remember that part.
All the audience was like, "Oh!"
The crowd disapproval.
Dude, old SpongeBob is the best SpongeBob.
Yeah, it's not a brain rot at all.
No. Actually,
Who are you guys again?
SpongeBob was one of the reasons that Nickelodeon went under, like Nickelodeon Studios, because SpongeBob was one of the first things that Nickelodeon had put out where they truly put a ton of money into like advertising and merchandise and like all this stuff. Like they did Rugrats merchandise, but not. They put billions into SpongeBob's merchandising, and then that, and then Dora the Explorer. And then in 2005, Nickelodeon Studios just kind of shut down. And I remember as a kid, I was like, I want to visit Nickelodeon Studios. I want to be in the audience for one of these shows that they film. Legends of the Hidden Temple, the game show they did with kids. And
know that one.
Oh my gosh, it was so awesome. I've been on a huge like nostalgia kick recently. Like my kids are watching the Disney show Out of the Box, which came out like 1998, and like my brother and I watched when we were kids.
I don't know that one.
It's just like it proves that like they didn't have all the tech that we have, and so they spend each episode figuring out how you can turn trash or recyclables or random things you find around the house and create an entire day with it. And so like the latest episode the kids were watching was called Tube City, and it was all about like paper towel tubes and wrapping paper tubes and all that stuff, and they created a bunch of like toys and things with it. And I was like, "This is kids. This is what you should be doing. I don't need to buy you anything for Christmas.
Go make it.
Make a car city out of milk cartons and cardboard and paint it. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we need.
Huge nostalgia kick.
That's fun. I look forward to it. I think that's the hack in life.
Fun reminiscing.
It's a good way to relive your childhood is by having kids and then relive it with them.
Well, yeah, but your childhood was filled with the movies and TV shows of like Andy Griffith's childhood. So
I know. That's true, and I still watch those.
So, ooh, heavy hitter today, fellas. When humans play God.
Yeah.
Tired of it? I loved when we touched on it briefly, an episode months and months ago. But that quote sticks in my head from Jurassic Park. These scientists, they spent so much time trying to wonder if they could. They never stopped to think.
If they should.
If they should, yeah.
It's a great, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great line. It's a great line from
yeah.
that movie. By the wonderful Jeff Goldblum. But, yeah, lots of thoughts. Lots of, personal experiences with friends and family and myself. But where, I don't know, where do you think we should start?
Well, I think
don't know.
just right off the bat, the first thing that comes to mind is it's a very natural thing to us as humans to try to play God, because we are made in the image and likeness of God, and the only one who can create and destroy things is God himself.
Yep.
And this is something that I learned in biology and physics, more so physics, but energy can neither be destroyed nor created. It can only be transferred or
Subverted. Or
almost just turned into something else, transformed
Yeah, there it is.
into something different.
Yeah.
But it's something that I feel like we have to face every single day up to our death, is fighting that desire to want to play God, to want to be God, to want to be in control, to want to be in charge. And then if you just kind of like what the Jeff Goldblum quote kind of suggests is, if you would stop and think, well, if I was actually in control, how much good would I actually do? Because if you're in control, you wouldn't just be in control of yourself. You'd be in control of everything, which means you had to handle and control everything. And it's not just a one time, let's just press play and watch what happens. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of people who kind of they kind of fall under that belief system of, well, God's just a distant God who just hit play back when Adam and Eve, and then watched it go to shit and go, well, oops.
Yeah, that's the belief of deists. I actually used to proclaim that I was one. A believer that essentially God got the ball rolling and it's our job to keep it rolling. He just sits up there and kind of watches everybody like a TV show, essentially.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point to start with, is that, we're made in the, like you said, we're made in the image and likeness, and so like God, there's this ability and desire to create and to build things, but we've kind of lost the ability to suffer well, and so you think about, like, even 100 years ago, we didn't have all these solutions. So when hard things came into your life, really your only option was to just learn how to live with it and deal with it. If you were a Christian, you offered it up. It was seen as a sanctifying thing. But now we live in a time where suffering is the worst thing in the world, and our goal is become to live as comfortably as possible. So we keep creating things, trying to better our life. But you look around us and you see the tremendous growth and advancements that we've had, and yet somehow people don't really seem that much happier. The world doesn't really seem to be functioning that much better. And now we've tapped into the very natural aspects of life, and things that man never thought he'd have control over. Human life, and like the rearing of children and the development of children, and even the way we can create children now. We're tapping into something that, I hate to keep going back to Jurassic Park, but we never asked the question, should we have ever breached this
right
this void?
Yeah.
You know, we've entered into almost the spiritual realm, and we are, you know, I think some people have this God complex of, I am like God. I can create life. I read somewhere that a scientist, I'm not sure what he would be called, but I would say a monster. He said that he's a couple years away from creating an artificial womb.
Yeah, you've mentioned this a
Have
couple
I?
times.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure
yeah.
I have. And, I mean, God,
It's worth coming back to.
it is, because now you've completely deprived a child of the safety of a mother's womb, a living, breathing person. And, you know, like, you've divorced that child from the, what do you call it, the connection that the child, you know, has with that mother. That
Yeah.
It's not natural.
It's not. And we've gotten to the point where, you know, a child should be begotten, not made.
Right.
Yeah.
And we are now making children. I mean, we say that in daily, you know, in our conversations, like, you know, my wife and I, we had a baby, we made a baby, you know, but it was understood that it was begotten, that it came from the husband and wife.
Right.
And
Right.
now we've taken them out of the equation. And with that, I mean, there's so much corruption that's already taken place, but there's even
In
more.
just the short amount of time.
Just in the short amount of
Oh,
time.
absolutely.
You know, we've what's the word?
Commoditized.
Commodi-
if that's a word.
Something
And,
like
We've
that.
turned.
my mom's like, oh my gosh.
Really,
Adam?
Adam?
I
I
taught
taught
you
you better.
We've turned. Yeah, your incandescent ass.
So shut it.
We've turned giving birth and turned the creation of a new child into a commodity.
Yeah, into a business, and frankly, it's none of it. It should not be a business. And what's sad about it is, we're choosing what is worthy of life. We're choosing what's worthy of our care and our love. You know, so like now, you know, parents are able to, you know, choose which genes they want and what characteristics, and you know, I was actually talking to my wife, you know, because I've been thinking a lot about this episode, and she made a point. She's like, how often in life do we, you know, build something that we've always, or, you know, like in some way obtain something that we've always wanted, you know, whether we created it, designed it, whatever it is, and then we find one little flaw in it, and like, you know, that we had missed, somehow overlooked, or maybe we just kind of get bored of it. And it's like, what's to say that you wouldn't do that with these children that you've, you know, in your mind perfectly created? But, you know, what happens if it's turned into a commodity, you know, that you can't return? So if there's any flaw in it, aren't you going to be kind of disappointed, upset? Whereas doesn't seem like that was really the case when we let God create our children, and we just accepted, you know, the difficulty and the good. It seems like we've created another avenue that we can now be at war with each other, and, you know, well, honey, you wanted this gene, you know, I told you not to, and, you know, we can now fight over who picked what, and plus the mere act of how we go about it, like the man has to go into the back room and do something kind of, you know, naughty, and, you know, in order to get the sperm out, and
Yeah.
you know, it's like it's not even an act of love between these two. It's a divorced
The
action.
whole thing.
Yeah, and then we just merge these, you know, this one little aspect of the act together. But
It's all selfish acts designed for your own fulfillment of your own selfish desires.
right.
Well,
If that makes sense.
yeah, no, 100%.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't think it's selfish desires, because I'm sure
you
there
are doing it for each other.
and
But see, that's
The
where I
ends
would
don't-
go, how? Because if you're not coming together,
But
you're not even
doing
coming.
it- But yes, but I think it's selfish in a way. I think it's selfish to your marriage. I think.
yes,
Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
the two of you are now one, and you can be selfish together. Like 100%, I could be a complete and total jackass to my family and be like, no, you're gonna watch my kids when I come over, or you know what I mean? Like, we can be selfish as a unit.
But that's selfishness in general.
I
That's
was
true,
I
yeah.
was giving a nod
Tit
to
for tat, semantics, whatever.
Yeah, I was giving a nod to those who would go this route because they deeply desire to have children and they can't on their own. I acknowledge like that is a real cross, but the means don't justify that good ends,
Right.
because what you're doing is you're not doing it together at this point. You're going, in a sense, kind of around behind God's back, and you're taking him out of the equation. You're not trusting him.
Yeah.
Well, and this is where I'm sorry.
Yeah. No.
Keep going.
Go ahead.
I was just this is a kind of because I looked up what the Catholic Church teaches is, it's the 4 pillars of a true and faithful marriage, or a true marriage, and there's 4 pillars. 1 is free, 2 is total, 3 is faithful, 4 is fruitful. So in order, in the Catholic Church eyes, for a marriage to be valid, it has to hit the checkbox on all 4 of those. So free means the spouses are free to marry, right? One wasn't coerced or manipulated into marrying the other.
Right, or isn't previously already married.
and hasn't gotten annulment. 2 is total. So the spouses are freely exchanging their consent to each other, again, uncoercedly.
Right.
3 is faithful, so the spouses promise to be faithful to each other and avoid extramarital affairs. And 4,
well, go ahead.
no, keep.
Well, just on that point, there's only 2 ways to extract sperm from a man. One is for him to perform a certain act, right? But in order to do that, we're visual people.
Right.
We have to picture somebody. And so, if you're looking at porn or a magazine, I mean,
Which can
firmly
constitute as porn.
I firmly believe looking at those things is a form of infidelity, because you are desiring, at least in that moment, this other woman.
Yep.
So in that, you're not being faithful, and again, the means don't justify the ends. So we don't do a bad act for a good reason. It doesn't work. I mean,
Right.
You can get into some deeper waters with that, but
Well, and then the 4th pillar is fruitful. So the spouses intend to be open to children. And that's one that there are so many marriages out there that aren't open to being fruitful because they're using either contraception, they get an abortion, they do IVF, because I would say almost in like a devil's advocate kind of way, when you and your wife are not capable of having kids just naturally, and you go out of your way again to play God, to try to artificially inseminate, or to basically bring life to where God has not willed it either yet, or God has not willed it, period. And you try to play God and you try to tiptoe around God, that's not being fruitful, because you're not letting God produce the fruits, which if you look at plants, right, you don't produce the fruit. You plant the seed, you water the seed after you buried it in dirt, and then you let the proper sun, you let God pour some more water on it, or you pour some water on it, but you still don't do the actual growing of the plant.
right, we cooperate in it, but
Exactly.
we're not.
And so
in
you're
control
not
of it.
cooperating with God in the confines of your marriage. So therefore, one of the 4 pillars is you're tiptoeing around one of the 4 pillars, which all 4 pillars have to be checked in order for your marriage to be a valid marriage.
Right.
Can you go up and tap it so it turns this way just a little bit?
And the other thing too, this is more of a parallel point, but it's right in there. I mean,
Thanks, buddy.
That we've opened this door for there was a story where there was some small town where the doctor was he was switching out his seed for other people's, and they came to find out that more than half this town was basically all related to each other.
There's a movie. There's a movie with Vince Vaughn that played off that exact story.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, there's not even a guarantee that what you have in your mind perfectly constructed and all the boxes you checked, there's not even guarantee that it's going to be your child at the end of the day.
Yep.
You know, and so you've given the rights to somebody else, and then even to back it up, it's even worse than that. I mean, again, like especially as Catholics, but certainly as Christians, we've, you know, in this very act, hundreds of eggs end up getting, or you know, hundreds of fetuses ended up getting aborted because they all get either discarded or they get frozen. And if you never use them, well, sometimes they get aborted or they get, without your knowledge, sold to other people. Like it's not even this clean thing.
It never is.
It never is. And so because we've gotten so far away from the natural act that now we've let man, we've let the government, we've let scientists, we've let businessmen into what is a very sacred domain.
Yeah.
That they have no business being in.
Yeah, 100%. And you've said, but that's the mock of the human condition, right? It's like, it turns, Dan, you've said this before, humans are the only species that look at life and are selfish about it, for the most part. I don't think I can think of any other, like, being out there that is selfish to its own existence, of where it's like, you know, we are not part of the ecosystem. Yes, it's survival of the fittest for the most part.
But that's instinctual.
But that's instinctual, right? It's instinctual. It is something that is natural, and we are the only species out there that try to go against the natural, that try to go against the grain, and is like, I am not. I understand that I wasn't born this way, but I'm going to make it this way. I'm going to try to control it. Something that you said, Joseph, stuck out to me, and this was in a private conversation, I believe, off air at some point, but you said, and I want to try to get it right. Gosh darn it, it's escaping me now. That's no fun.
Cliffhanger.
Well,
but you said, and it's very hard, and I will agree with you 100%, but it's very hard to come to grips with, but it's biblical. You are given the cross that you bear. And there's this, and it's one of my least favorite Bible verses, but it is still 100% true. The Lord favors who he favors, and he does not favor who he does not favor. He chooses in every moment how to favor each person. And if your cross is to not be able to have children, that's your cross.
right.
Right.
It is not your job to artificially create that life for yourself. There are a ton of people that I know that's going to piss the hell off, and I don't necessarily. I mean, I care, and I'm sorry that you've gone through these things. 100%, I'm sorry for that. But it's, and then of course they look at me and they're like, "Well, you have kids without even freaking trying." I'm like, "Yeah," and now I've got 5 children. I'm only 34. I'm trying to feed them all. That's my cross.
What, and that's something I actually wanted to touch on is crosses are going to come regardless. Suffering is going to come regardless. You cannot miss it. It is going to hit you whether you like it or not.
You can't remove yourself from the suffering.
But the moment you try to
suffering.
dictate which suffering happens to you is when you start adding crosses to yourself.
Yep.
Because
that's so good.
Because what happens, it's just like what Jesus says in Matthew, take my yoke, for my yoke is easy.
My burden is light.
When Christ gives you a cross, because he tells you, pick up your cross and follow me. If you want to get to heaven, pick up your cross and follow Christ. Do what he did.
Yeah.
Guess what? He picked up his cross without, and pardon my French, but without bitching, without complaining, took up his cross because he knew what his job was. He knew what his mission was.
Yeah.
And he went and fulfilled it to the T.
I heard a pastor say this one time. Jesus went through the most pain absolutely imaginable, and he didn't say a freaking word.
You know what started it? A betrayal from his best friend with a kiss.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So,
talk about crosses needing to be bared.
To say, one of the inner circle of his friends kissed him, and that was the act of the betrayal.
I mean, think about it. That would be like you throwing me in jail for something that I didn't do. Getting me thrown at like life in prison for something I didn't do because it made you some money.
And when you got arrested,
Yeah.
You told
Or
the
vice
cops,
versa. I'm not saying you would do that.
Yeah.
and when you got him
It would
arrested,
be like me.
and when you got him arrested, you tipped off the cops on who they were to arrest by giving him a hug.
Yeah.
By saying, it's great to see you, friend.
Yeah, and then stepping back and letting the cops swoop in
Yep.
and take you away. Yeah, no, you know that I've heard this. I heard this expression, and I've said this before. Never be so sure of what you want that you would give up something better.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know, this idea back to what you were saying, Dan, of, you know, okay, like maybe you solve this one cross in your life, but, you know, you don't know what you missed out on.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's you and your wife having that free time, you know, like it because you don't, first of all, you don't know how long this period of infertility is going to last, because there are natural ways to fix it. Sometimes it just takes people a while. Sometimes my wife knows somebody. It took them, I think it was 10 years to conceive.
I wonder if we know the same person, because I was just thinking somebody took 10 years as well.
We might, but who she's talking about, it's they don't live in this state, and
Okay.
I don't know them. But this is just someone that she knows, and you know, it took them many years to conceive. But in that time, the two of them really grew in trust and love, and they were able to do things together that maybe they wouldn't have been able to do. And then one day, God blessed them with this child, and they, you know, what a gift. But they built this beautiful life while always maintaining this openness to life, and they just took that time as a gift. And you know, there are some people who'd probably envy them, you know, who can have kids very easily and never really got to have much of a honeymoon stage. You know, Adam would be a great example. Yeah.
Well, and then just real quick,
Yeah, please.
I was just going to say there's also the other end, the people who don't want kids. And all of a sudden a kid comes along
Yeah.
because of your choices as well as someone else's choices.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden you've got this, what you see, or not you, I'm not blaming any viewer or anyone here, but
You know who you are.
We don't
yeah,
have to
if
be.
you've
We don't
done
have to
it,
be so.
you know who I'm talking about.
We don't have to be so careful.
Yeah, if you've done it, you know who you are. But and then all of a sudden, you as an individual who are contemplating this action, abortion, are seeing this burden that has now been put on you because you couldn't say no. And I'm not going to sit here and go, oh, what about the 3%, 4%
It's not
of rape cases? Listen, that is an that is unfathomable place to be put in.
Yeah.
And I can't fathom it. But you don't take what's less than 10% of the majority to dictate
the majority.
exactly what happens to the rest of the people.
But then
that's
playing-
completely
Yeah.
that is inherently false. And so all of a sudden you get these people who see this burden that has now been put on them, and they go, well,
We got
I
a
want
way
to
out.
play God,
Yep.
and I have a way out, and yet you don't see what's about to come down the pipe if you end up making that choice, because how many there are countless women out there who end up either coming to God or they just come to recognize what happened because God kind of drops it into their mind and into their heart what they did.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it wrecks them.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing, you are killing a life. You are killing an innocent life.
Yeah.
Right.
And to put it in perspective, statistically, women who have an abortion are 2 to 6 more times likely to commit suicide within the first year afterwards.
That's really sad. That's very sad.
Like putting up like guys' numbers, amount of suicides,
Yeah.
because they can't deal with what they did, because the reality actually hits them.
Deep down, I think we all know when we sin and mess up, even if nobody else knows. I don't know if you can quite fully suppress your conscience enough.
No.
To think that what I did, was fine. I had an abortion. I don't think anyone is quite that naive to think that abortion is 100% innocent.
They may be for a short amount of time, but they will never be.
Yeah.
At some point in their life, there will
feel
come
it.
a reckoning.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that it's a little bit, I think there's a part of us that knows instantly, but
100%.
It's also a fallen world and fallen people.
For sure. Yeah. And we are very good at anything that we do justifying it.
Yeah.
So why would this be any different?
And for those of you who have comments, have questions, for me to care about it, this is one of the best quotes I've ever heard ever. And I think I can spread it to the three of us. For us to actually, like, we'll listen anytime. If you have something to say, if you want to talk to us, whatever, about what we've said. Because this is just the beginning of season 3. Like, we're going to get real deep on a lot of issues. And if you have a concern, if you're in my phone, then you can have that concern. If not, it's not going to affect me. I'm sorry. This is what I believe. This is what we believe. And it's and I know a lot of you out there don't know my story, and I won't go excuse me, super deep into it, but girlfriend from high school got an abortion without my permission.
Or knowledge, right?
Or knowledge. I had no forethought, no nothing. She actually told me she had a miscarriage. And then that voice of God spoke up to her and was like, you better call him and tell the truth. And wrecked me for years. Put me in a mental institution. I'm not afraid to admit that at all. I'm a completely different person now. But wrecked me for years. Still got trust issues because of it. It wrecked my heart. Because that was a life that I was preparing. Because I knew she was pregnant. I was putting in 12-hour shifts at my job to prepare for this. It's like, okay, here it is. We got to go. You know, I was 20 years old. And the sin that created the child does not justify the sin to remove the child.
Right. That's where the devil wins twice, is that second act.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like, I mean, it's, you know, it's painful as it is. We were talking about earlier, you know, rape and do we really need to give the devil the second victory of murdering an innocent child?
Right. There was a guy, oh my gosh, wrecked my freaking world. There was a guy, he's an anti-abortion activist, and he goes around to schools preaching about it. And he was talking about how, like, well, what if there's rape and all that stuff? And he's like, okay, so then you're giving the rapist exactly what he wants?
Right, because now there's
Because if you have the kid, you know who the guy is. You can go after him. Child support, you can ruin his life. Put him behind bars like he belongs. But if you abort the child, you're giving him exactly what he wants.
Zero proof.
He got what he wanted, and he got away with it because you got no proof.
That's a great point. I hadn't thought about that before.
And that blew my mind. Because that destroys the rape argument right away.
And obviously there are other, and I'm a guy, I don't know what it's like, right? But there's also a majority of women also don't know what it's like either. Thank God.
Correct.
Thank God. But when it comes to, I don't know, when it comes to that sort of scenario, there's also adoption. So it's not like you have to keep the kid if it's too much of a mental and spiritual burden for you to look at the child and just, like, there's adoption. There are other avenues other than just completely wiping its existence out.
Yeah. Right. I do feel that's where the Christian community actually has failed, because we so avidly preach against abortion, but we don't preach Jesus said the ultimate religion is to take care of widows and orphans.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And orphans are
and
the
prisoners,
ones,
actually, too.
But the orphans are the ones that we don't think about, because it's like, well, the argument has to be the abortion, not the adopted child, and we can't. You know what I mean? We haven't really we've been advocates against abortion, but not for adoption and for helping these agencies and all the things. And then I to take it back to, go ahead. Actually, you had a thought.
Just, we are such supposed champions of human rights and against human suffering, but we really haven't. We've really let go of. And stop supporting the very institutions that actually helped in those areas. I mean, you're right. Like, Christians, like, we've kind of, I mean, there are plenty of institutions and groups and support programs out there. But we moved away from them, or they don't get the spotlight like they once did.
Yeah.
And some of that is, hospitals. I don't think they are advocating for these things anymore. Maybe because there's no money in it. I don't really know where the money trail starts and ends and goes off. But, like women in these crisis situations, you would hope that their family and their community would like rally around them and help. But we've built this culture, really a lie, that they are on their own. They're not. They're not on their own. They're just not given the options that are there.
Yeah.
I think they're made to believe, women are made to believe, and men too, that this is their problem alone and no one is going to help them with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And to take it back to this is all humans playing God, but the IVF situation, read a story about a guy and a girl a married couple who tried for almost a decade to have kids. They had all the shots. They spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars on treatment after treatment after treatment. And they tried for, decades. Not decades, sorry. Almost a decade, if memory serves. And then once they stopped the hormone treatments and stuff, they had a kid. And then the hormones messed her up so much that she, out of the blue, I don't want to be with you, I divorce you. And they were the closest tight-knit couple. But because all these treatments and all the things messing with her emotions in her head and all the things pumped into her body that aren't natural.
I've heard the same thing.
Now this kid has to grow up in a separated home.
Yeah. I've heard similar stories about women who are on like birth controls. And as soon as they go off like contraception, that the chemistry that she felt towards that man oftentimes disappears.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so what point did all that serve? Like you thought you were waiting until the proper time, but then that proper time comes, or when you're ready, suddenly divorce is the next step instead of having kids.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what, my mom was on contraception for all almost 6 of us. She was on contraception for all 6 of us. 2 of us didn't make it. But my mom actually died giving birth to my sister.
I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Oh, but they resuscitated her.
Well, no, she came back before the paddles, as far as I know.
Wow.
Because that's where that's where she's always told me from pretty much ever since my sister was born. I talk to God.
Yeah.
And a couple times she's told me that she's like face-to-face talked to God.
Wow.
This time, it wasn't really a face. It was more of a cloud and a booming voice. And yeah.
Well, that's biblical. It says in the Bible, no man can look at the face of the God and live.
Well, so she...
Yeah.
She was dying.
Yeah. So I guess she wasn't
sister,
living. So like
my sister was smaller than a regular man's palm when she was born.
Whoa.
That preemie.
Wow. Grace, who's now what, 5'10"?
Who's now 2 inches shorter than I am, yeah.
So 5'8"?
No, like 5'9".
Yeah.
I think I'm like 6, 5'11" on a good day.
Yeah. And can walk and talk. She's at Mizzou, like the
she's
whole
good.
9 yards.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so she was in the NICU for over a month. But my mom died. And the last thing she saw was my dad going, Dixie, please don't leave me. Please don't leave me.
Wow.
Pastor was praying over her, and all of a sudden she's up in the clouds, and she hears in a big booming voice, Dixie, it's time to come home. And she goes, I can't leave my husband. My husband now has 4 kids. I can't leave him. I can't leave the family. I can't leave not only my husband, but my kids. Like, I can't do it. And he just goes, Dixie, it's time to come home. She goes, okay, God, I'm done fighting you. I want to go home. All of a sudden, clouds all disappear. It was almost like a cartoon moment is what my mom said. Vision completely, or all the clouds kind of disappear into one singular, what you would kind of at least visually see as like a pixel on a TV. Kind of all converges in a circular motion onto one pixel. And then all of a sudden she comes up, and the nurses are frantically running around. There's no beeping, and now there's finally beeping in the heart monitor, and the pastor is still praying over her. My dad is kind of frantic, and yeah,
I can't imagine your dad frantic.
And apparently, she was gone for a couple minutes
Wow.
and came back. And I mean,
That's an incredible story.
my mom was on numerous different contraceptions for all 4 of us kids while we were born. All of these different contraceptions that were given, 95% success rate, 99% success rate. We were still born. She didn't get off of them to have us. She was on them while she had us.
Yep.
Wow.
So, I mean, listen, if you're going to have a baby and God says you're going to have a baby, you're going to have it regardless. So you might as well just give it up.
Yeah, why go through the process of damaging your body and taking all these foreign, drugs that harm you?
Yeah.
With all 4 of us, God just said, hey, you know what, Dixie, Mike, hold my beer because watch this.
Yeah. Have you seen the pictures of the infants that are born with the IUD in their hands? It's like the birth control device in their hands.
Whoa, that's
Have you
awesome.
seen that?
I haven't.
Yeah.
That's neat.
So it's just
That's a
this.
good
It's
image.
apparently copper or something is like
Yeah.
a killer of sperm, but like these babies come out holding the freaking thing when they're born.
That's
as
awesome.
like a trophy of like F you.
Losers.
Wait, is this like a stage thing, or they're
No,
actually born holding
They're actually
something?
born holding them.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. They're born like holding the contraceptive device that is implanted in the uterus.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to see to look it up. It's
I will.
It's incredible.
Wow.
But then I mean that's how my twins were born. My ex was on contraceptives, and we had 2 at the same time.
Yep.
Ben, my
life finds a way.
my youngest son was there was no possible. So it's get a little scientific and weird for you, but sperm can live up to 5 days in the uterus. Mine lived up to 6, and then Ben was born. Like we do, so we do NFP obviously, and like natural family planning, and so we basically go time is when she's not fertile at all because we chart the windows and stuff.
Right.
And it lived for 6 days until the first day she was fertile, and then got pregnant.
So if God wants it, it's going to
If
happen.
God wants it, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Regardless what us humans try to do.
And that is the staple of marriage in the Catholic Church, and I believe a universal law in all Christians should be. Thank you, sir. Should be, you should be open to life no matter what, whenever it happens, whatever and
Well, and that's what a lot of people don't understand is that the Catholic Church teaches in order for your marriage to be valid, validated by what the Catholic Church believes, God validates, is you have to be open to life.
yeah,
Yeah.
If you're not, then you are missing one of the 4 pillars.
yeah. And this and speaking devil's advocate for a second, like as someone who fought the ideologies of the Catholic Church for the longest time, it's like the book was written by men, yes, but their ideologies derive from biblical teachings.
It's from God. God
Yeah,
is
it's divine inspiration.
Right.
Yeah. God doesn't just look out for man and go, "Meh, women."
All right, Dan. That's true.
Touche.
Women pray. God's just
Ask your husband. Tell him to pray to me.
I want to hear the man's voice.
But so what? I think it all boils down to our willingness, or our what we think control is. And we talked about this on multiple episodes of like this idea of control and controlling your life. And so I guess my question is, at what point, like, are there examples that you both can think of like where it's appropriate to control certain outcomes of your life, or where it's denying your cross? Does that make sense? So like,
Yeah.
let's speak as though Adam can't have kids whenever he freaking wants, and is not, his sperm armed to the teeth. Let's assume for a second that they're not. How do you carry that cross? You know what I mean? How do you carry that? I know multiple people that have struggled with having kids. And to your point you said earlier, I also know a couple that they were married for 10 years and tried all the time. Not that they would like text me, but like
Right.
they said, tried for 10 years to have children. And then once we had our first, we had 4 more. I think they had 4 more or 3 more after that. And so they ended up with 4 kids. And they just, like you said, they grew in their marriage and they grew in their love for each other.
Right.
And they were like, God, whatever it will be for you,
Right.
But
I think-
how do you carry that cross?
I think that's how you do it. It's just every day, you know what, God, I don't know as much as I think I do.
Yeah.
I don't, I may think I know what's best for me. I may really want this with all my heart.
Yeah.
But just because I want something doesn't mean, right? It doesn't mean that that's necessarily what's best for me.
Yeah.
A 2-year-old may really want to drink bleach. As a parent, you're not going to let your kid drink bleach no matter how much he wants it, right?
My daughter is obsessed with getting into the cleaning supplies cabinet right now. With all the chemicals and stuff. We're like, stop!
Wait a minute, which one?
Like, there's 7 other cabinets that you could get into right now. But
The
it's
youngest
that
one?
Yeah.
Okay.
so.
I was gonna say if the oldest one, you need to make sure that the liquid is at the same level as before, and
Yeah, my almost 10-year-old is like, what's this taste like? No. It's my
Clorox.
It's my 11-month-old who's like,
but that's
she's 11 months today. Hot dog.
Wow.
But she's always like grabbing at like sponges that we've used for the counters and like, get away from, stop. Why are you doing this?
and so I would ultimately say, number one, go to God.
Yeah.
Because no matter what problem you're facing, go to God. He may not give you an answer right now. He may not give you an answer in the foreseeable future. Because especially when you're going through a problem and he's not answering you right that moment, that your first thought is, well, I guess I'll never get an answer. And that's not true. You may never get an answer.
Yeah.
But at least if you continue to go to God and you continue to surrender your control up to him, I truly believe at a certain point you will reach a point in your heart that is unbeknownst to you to where you'll be like, you know what, and that's okay. I don't need to know.
Yeah.
But it takes consistency. I mean, this has kind of been something that's been coming up with me is just being consistent.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you may go see God in the morning. Yeah, you may go see God in the evening. What about in the morning and the evening? And once you hit that kind of like prime day of like, you know what, I spent time with you in the morning. I spent some time with you in the evening. Spent some time with you in the afternoon. I just spent time with you.
Yeah.
Can you make that consistent?
Yeah.
Keep going, right? Because no one ever got further in life by just that one time. And if they did, right, like people who hit the lottery, so people who kind of financially grew at one very specific moment in life, they end up blowing it in a month.
95% or I think it's 97 or 8% of all people that win the lottery are broke within 5 years.
Uh-huh. So obviously if that's human nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we're given a gift that we're not ready for, we're gonna blow it.
Yeah.
More crosses are gonna come down the pipeline, and sometimes that's what we need in order to learn.
Yeah.
Like, hey, next time you need to be prepared.
Yeah.
Because this is something reading the book, The First Love. It's about Mary. Don't ask me about the author. Can't remember. But it was within the introductory. It was right after the first page. It was one of the last sentences of the first paragraph. Don't ask me why I can picture it.
That sip was really good. Kind of blew
I
me.
spit in it. It's
Dang it,
talking
Dan.
it's talking about Mary. Odd transition, but it's talking about Mary, and it's talking about the creation of Mary to
it
be a
together.
vessel
Pull it together, Joseph.
for Jesus.
Yeah.
I think I might just be bipolar the way I can just flick the switch on and off.
It's not bipolar, it's ADHD.
It's just you. But
Called a lack of control.
I gave up control a long time ago, Joseph. But so it's talking about Mary and how God created Mary for a very specific purpose.
Yeah.
And us as Christians, especially us as Catholics, Catholic Christians, we believe that Mary is the mother of God. We have a previous episode with Father Dieters about Mary and the dogmas, so the kind
Lead
of
the heathens to Christ.
Unwritten beliefs. Yeah, woof. That we believe about Mary.
Yeah.
And so most sectors of Christianity believe that Mary is definitely the mother of God.
Right.
And so to be a part of that, the Catholic Church believes that she was given very special graces that no one else was given because she was the mother of God himself.
Yeah.
Made flesh. And so with that, one of the last sentences is that God never does anything without exceeding preparation.
So then again, playing
That's
devil's
true.
advocate for those who have those giant crosses. So God exceeded preparation for the cross that I'm bearing. So then it's so difficult to look at that and say, how is God for me? You know what I mean?
I think that road looks different for everybody, but it seems to, like, when I hear success stories of people that struggled, went through a horrific period in their life and then came out on the other side, the thing that seems to pop up the most is that they seem to have formed a gratitude towards that cross and acceptance of what will come. And I think that the book that came to mind is, and I forget his name, you guys will probably know it, On Fire, about that man who was...
John O'Leary.
I'm glad I didn't say anything.
I'm not
the
gonna,
author that I had was not that.
I'm not gonna lie to you. True story. Built a table for him when
That's
I worked
right.
at the
Yeah.
furniture company.
I forgot about
he
that.
He has an incredible story, and he's an incredible human being.
He is.
Yeah.
And read the book if you haven't. But On Fire, and this man went through. He was burned head to toe. And
I don't know how. Like 76% of his body was burned.
At least.
Yeah.
I mean, it might have been more. But yeah, we'll just say 76% of his body was burned. And that sounds like a wrong word. The ringer that he went through. I mean, it's just more pain than anyone, most people probably go through. Or you think about someone who, I read a story recently about an athlete. He was on track to be, to go pro. I think it was in football, and freak accident, his leg gets amputated. All of those hopes and dreams go away.
Yeah.
And and he went through a period of crisis where he had to wrestle with this and accept it. He went through denial, all these things. But with all these stories, there comes a point where they are just grateful that they are still alive, and in some way they're able to give back, and they're then grateful. Later on they're able to give back to society. Maybe they become a motivational speaker, or they just talk about their experience, and it gives hope to other people. They're able to channel that difficulty into hope for somebody else, and that gives them gratitude for what they went through, and a hope for a better future. And a lot of times they'll take stock of their old life, and they realize, wow, I was kind of selfish, and I was kind of this way and that way, and all those burdens, because sin is it's a burdensome thing that we carry with us all through our life. But they were forced to let go of those things, and then the freedom that they felt in that next phase of their life was way better than they could have thought.
Yeah.
And I think that's what suffering really comes down to, is having a gratitude for suffering, because it keeps us human, it keeps us humble, and then having this hope for the future, that God still loves us through all these difficult times. No one's divorced of pain and suffering, so why spend your life trying to skirt around it? You'd be way better and more happy, I think, if you learn to live with it than trying to avoid it. I mean, you look at like a marriage, for example. A husband and wife that don't quite get along. Their marriage gets so much worse when they start avoiding each other, as opposed to working, on that marriage together. What comes of it when you start avoiding pain and suffering? It just catches up with you, usually in a stronger way.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you avoid if you, and this is kind of what I was saying earlier, like if you avoid the cross that God has put upon your shoulders and you do everything to try to negate it, you're going to end up worse because because a lot of times the cross, a lot of times the cross that God is trying to give you is for your, is like what you said, Joseph, it's for your betterment, it's for your sanctification.
Right.
But if you don't accept it, ultimately what you're doing is you're not accepting God's protection, because what comes with God's cross is God's protection from other crosses later down the line.
Whoa, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because this is the way I've kind of thought, is when God gives you a cross, God is giving you the easiest cross for you. And I know for some people, a lot of people, me included sometimes, who's, kind of going through a small one right now.
Sure.
Like, looking at the cross that's beset to each of us, like all of us, we have our own crosses. Everyone's going through stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look at someone else's cross, like, I know someone right now who's going through a miscarriage.
It's a tough time. I know some.
Shoot.
I have some family members.
Like, I can't imagine. And when they told me, I was just trying to find the words to console them, and nothing was coming to mind besides, man, I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
And I know my parents have gone through 2. One of them was, like, close to being born.
Wow.
And so it was, like, far along. And all, like, I just remember it wrecked my mom and dad. And so, like,
Every time.
Sorry. I know a couple alcoholics, and their cross now is their alcoholism, but the cross that they were avoiding was a pain in their past life.
Yep.
That they turned to drinking, and now that became the new cross.
And yet they still had to deal with the original cross.
Right. So they didn't do away with the old one. They just numbed it for a little while, and now they're dealing with 2 crosses, or one heavier one, and every single one of them that I've talked to wishes they had dealt with the pain in their past life better and not turned towards this other,
Something that
cross.
just numbs
Yeah.
the pain.
Yeah.
Instead of actually goes in to the root.
Right.
And uproots it.
We also have an interesting way of looking at crosses. We think that having more means that we are happier, but if you look at, like people that go on mission trips to these other countries, or even here in the United States, we are not immune to poverty and impoverished communities. Some of the happiest people in the world are those that have dirt floors and 1 soccer ball for an entire, town.
Yeah.
We would compare our life to theirs and say, how could they be happy? That they have to walk 10 miles a day to get water, and they have to, fight for their meat and bread and, the food on their table. But yet they're happy.
Yep.
So, have we really solved all the problems by making our life easier? Not necessarily. I think we've compounded them. Right.
Yeah.
Because I think when we try to make life easier, ultimately what it's doing is making it harder.
And more complicated.
Go take a trip to the DMV to go renew your license and tell me life's not easier.
Yeah.
Or tell me life's easier.
There you go.
Right. Yeah, we've just created more things to insure, more things to protect, more things to take care of.
I don't know what life was like when we all rode horses and walked, but last time I checked, I didn't have to go see the government to go ride my horse.
Yeah.
Right. I'd have to pay taxes on that horse every year.
You probably did just at the sale of it, but
That's it.
unless you raised it.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
It was yours, damn it.
Yeah. Whoa, don't blame me. I may be bald, but I'm not that old.
Yes, you are.
You old.
Buzzard.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a good substitute.
Yep.
That's a crappy thing.
I love.
A buzzard.
Listen to that old buzzard.
Sounds like a man with partial dementia. Look at that old buzzard. That's a human. That's a human, Dad. Oh shit! Why does it look like it's got wings?
You sure about that?
Oh man, he
Why
spends
does it got wings near its ass?
he spends way too much time around that meat wagon. Old buzzard.
Oh, buzzard.
But I do want to say it's so much easier said than done advising people to trust God.
Of course.
It's so much easier to look at. I mean, I know some people who have who've done IVF twice and came out with twins both times, and now they're set, and they would never look you in the eye and be like, yeah, that was a mistake. You know what I mean?
The child isn't.
No, of course not.
The
Yeah.
life is not.
No.
But the act it took to make that life.
Yeah. And so, but they would defend it till the day they die.
Well, and you know what? It's not our job to, try to convince them necessarily. It maybe that's somebody else's, but it's not ours. That's not our point.
Yeah.
But that is something that they will have to reconcile. One day. I mean, as we here in this podcast, we are not sitting on a lofty, hillside, extending judgment out. We have all had our crosses. We've all had our share of mistakes.
And actually, the driveway does kind of lead down slope into the garage. So we're actually sitting downhill.
That's true. That is true.
We're below sea level.
We're below
Right.
you guys.
But we're bringing to this table the lessons that we have learned in our own lives. And I mean, I can just say from the things that I've gone through, the things that I've shared on this podcast, and things that I haven't shared yet, that it has been way better for me the times that I trust in God, that I extend a thankful heart and thank God in my prayers, than when I sit in anger and in judgment of God and in others who have wronged me and hurt me. I am not better off when I wallow in my pain and my suffering and allow myself to be angry.
Yeah.
I've never been better off. And I just don't know how that isn't the same for anyone else. I'm not that much, I'm no different than anybody else. Pain doesn't have to define me. It can make me stronger and better, but I'm not meant to live in that. There is something better out there. There is a good and gracious God that loves us, who allows pain and suffering to happen, but it is for our growth. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to see it at times. Some of the things that I went through as a child with my dad, I can't make sense of it. I wish God had picked a different cross for me, a different path, but what can I do? I can't go back in time and pick different parents or pick different circumstances. The saying is overused, but it is what it is at this point.
And I think even if you had the chance to, in a small way, see what your life would be like if you had it different, like It's a Wonderful Life.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I bet you'd probably look back and go, wow, my life would look substantially different, and I don't know if I'd really want that life.
Yeah.
We've been able to, everybody has been able to, touch somebody, help them in some way because of the pain and suffering that we've gone through.
That's a big reason why we go through it.
Yeah, because we are a communal people. Nothing is hidden. I had a good conversation with someone yesterday. We were talking about how nothing is actually hidden. Someone might never find out what you did, but it changes you.
Right.
So what you do in the privacy of your home, my next door neighbor doesn't know anything about it, but it changes who I am, and then how I interact with them, and then the decisions that I make when I leave the house. there's always a consequence
Yeah.
To everything.
to everything.
Yeah. My Caitlin and I were driving to.
This is gonna take a little bit. Can I go pee?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Upstairs, downstairs,
No, it doesn't matter.
corner.
Hadn't been done before. But there's Caitlin and I were driving to church on Sunday, and just randomly threw Spotify on, and playlist started going through, and it was a country song by Dan and Shay that came on. It's called "Then Again," and there's a line in that song that caught my attention. It says, "If I was in charge." Or I might have done a couple things differently if God put me in charge, but then again, I would have never met you. And no, I know it is a love song and whatever, but it's one of those situations where, I mean, there are multiple times throughout our lives, and I think that's part of the human condition and the fallenness of humans is if God put me in charge, this wouldn't be this way.
Right.
Okay, but if God put you in charge, there'd be a lot of other things wrong with your life.
Right.
Because you don't have the fortitude or the mind or anything to really take care of absolutely everything that you need. And I think that goes along with what you were saying. It comes down to gratitude. It comes down to thank you for keeping me on the list of people that get to breathe today.
Right. Gratitude and humility.
Yeah. And it's kind of a power couple, gratitude and humility. They kind of go hand in hand. It's yeah, that's
true.
I can't be humble without being grateful, because you can't truly understand how bad it could be versus how. I mean, yeah, if you look at the bad things and you stare at the cross and you think about the cross all the time, it's gonna be heavy and it's gonna suck and it's gonna, you know what I mean?
Right.
I highly recommend, I think I've said this before, but reading the book of Job. And because it's all about his suffering and the redemption on the other side of him choosing to believe through it. It's extremely cynical and sad book, but at the end, he's doubled in what was taken from him. And
I'll admit, I don't really understand, all the wisdom of that book.
It's very difficult to understand.
I don't understand. It's hard for me to totally grasp, why God would allow his 14 children to all be killed, or 12 children.
Something like that.
Yeah, whatever the number is. It's like so they were allowed to die just to, between, if you will, a bet between God and the devil. So I don't, it's hard for me to understand the justification of all those things, but in some ways it doesn't quite matter. The point is I don't know if this is the point, but
many points, but
many points. One of my takeaways is that there is a purpose and a plan. Part of it too is death is not the worst thing that can happen to you either. So his children dying, we can look at that, and that is sad. And that was something that, he grieved. He had to bury each of his children. But death is not the worst thing in the world. Damnation is the worst thing.
Yeah.
Being miserable is the worst thing in the world. So if we can learn to deal with our misery, if we can learn to accept our hard, the trials of life, then life isn't quite so bad anymore. If we make it to heaven, then we're not going to look back and think, we're not going to criticize the roadmap that got us to heaven. We're going to be grateful that we got there.
Yeah.
So it's just a transition into something better. Yep. Life is difficult, and it is.
Well, and that's the hope.
Yeah, that is the hope. If we can learn to treat suffering redemptively, and as we keep going back to this. As a child receives correction and a spanking from his loving parents, he may not fully understand it, but the parents know I'm I'm instilling a correction upon you so that you don't do that again for your betterment.
Right.
But it is pain.
For your sake.
Yeah. It is pain because humans do associate, we do respond to pain. It does drive home a point. And you can see, if you don't believe me, you can see an example between household that doesn't discipline and spank their kids and a household that does. And you also see a household that over spanks their kids too. So there are those obvious extremes.
There's a line.
But I try not to deal with the outliers because it gets so murky. It's like, okay, we're not talking about those extremes. That's a whole different thing.
Right.
Yeah.
What? And this is
Gesundheit.
this is with the cross that God has put on my lap. This is something that I've kind of always thought is, you know what? It's not near as bad as what some other people have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's still my cross. It's still a burden, and it still hurts. But this is kind of something that has always brought me consolation. Is especially the cross that I'm being called to bear. It has to deal with death. Like, my hope and my prayer, especially for these people who are not Catholics, is that obviously God is going to judge rightly and is going to be a just God with them.
Mm-hmm.
But my prayer is that God extends some grace to them. Because as Catholics, our belief is we don't know what happens when you die. And because we don't know what happens, it is not an assurance that you are going to heaven. There is a hope that you do.
Right.
And that's
we do know what happens, but we don't know what.
We don't know. What I mean is we don't know what happens to that soul, meaning we don't know where the final resting place is.
Yeah. Right.
So therefore, because we don't know, because you have not been explicitly told by God where that specific individual's soul is going to rest in eternity, we hope and pray that person's soul reaches God's consolation.
Yeah.
And just because you pray that person's soul rests in God's consolation does not mean that is a wasted prayer if for the individual's sake it does not.
Yeah.
Because there's no such thing as a wasted prayer.
Yeah. We had an episode with Mark Sutherland, comes out next week actually. But we went next door to have lunch, and we met the bartender who
What was that place called?
Circle 6 Ranch.
Circle 6
Ranch.
That's right. It was
Well, it's
market
all
and a watering hole down on 94 in Defiance. It's right on the S Bend.
Yeah, and
it's an awesome little place.
It's a fantastic place. Everything that they serve is grown on a local farm. The
owner's farm.
The meat, the veggies, everything is grown in potatoes, all of it.
That's great.
And we got to talking. I got to talking to the bartender, and a year ago, almost to the day, she lost both her kids in a house fire because they got trapped and they couldn't get to them.
Yeah.
And I came home, and I told Caitlin, we had a great episode and all that stuff. And I told her that I met this incredible woman who is getting through it all. She's, she got divorced because of the situation, but she is now newly engaged, and she's dealing with her cross as best she can. And she didn't move on or whatever. There's other circumstances. I'm not going to tell her whole story because it's not my story to tell. But
she's an awesome woman.
She's awesome, and told Caitlin about it, and Caitlin's just like, wow. We just kind of sat in silence for a second, and she just started weeping. And I was like, it's not our kids. It didn't happen. She's like, yeah, but I can't imagine. I can't imagine. So later that night, 3 out of the 5 children were raising hell, as the children say, and just off the wall. One was really unhappy. One couldn't be calmed down. One's an infant, so she couldn't tell us what was wrong, just screaming her head off. And I sat there and I took a deep breath, and I was just about to lose it. And she came up behind me and she wrapped her arms around me and she goes, "It's not a house fire.
What a great reminder.
It's not a house fire."
Which I know,
Wow.
if you're an individual going through something similar to that, like losing your kids, losing your
Losing
parents,
anyone,
losing
yeah.
your family members,
In such
I
an
know-
abrupt way.
Yeah.
just really and truly in any way.
Yeah.
To where they're there 1 second and gone the next.
Yeah.
I know it probably in this moment doesn't feel like any sort of consolation, but knowing that, again, what you go through brings consolation and hope to other people.
Yeah.
Like, again, if you're going through it right now, it's not going to make you feel any better. But just know that someone down the line, because they have heard your story, because they've heard what you've gone through, they are going to find consolation and hope in that. And you are going to benefit at least one individual along your line of life.
Because of the cross that you chose to bear.
Because of the cross that came down into your life and you chose to accept it.
That's beautiful. I think that's a great way to...
Yeah.
I don't know. Does anybody have any objections? I think that's a great end.
What? Where are we?
I love that. I'm going to keep that in mind. Just, it's not a house fire. That's, yeah.
Yep.
It could be worse.
All of our children are screaming at the same time.
Or right
It's not a
now,
house fire.
it's not a forest fire.
Yeah.
L.A.
Yeah.
Yeah. God be with them.
Or
Yeah,
it's
thoughts and
not-
prayers out to them.
It's not, floodwaters destroying 126,000 homes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us at the table, ladies and gentlemen. We have
Joseph?
Adam.
Dan.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.